Okay, so we start with Act 1, Scene 1, which actually begins with the servants of the Montagues and Capulets starting a fight in the streets. Neither of them wants to be the one to actually start the fight, but they're both eager to fight. And I think starting with the servants rather than with the actual Montagues and Capulets themselves, with the higher class members of the family, I think is an interesting structural choice by Shakespeare, and I think it has two effects. So first of all, it shows us the extent of the feud, that even the servants are involved, are so desperate to fight, shows how far it's gone, and also I think shows the pettiness of it, because the servants themselves aren't actually related to the families, and yet they are so willing to fight and die just to show their hatred for the other side. So the servants start the fight, and then the upper class members of the family arrive. So we see Benvolio, who's a Montague, Tybalt, who's a Capulet. And so Benvolio is a peacemaker, and he says, "You know not what you do," trying to get them to stop fighting, to put their swords up. And that language is similar to what Jesus says when he's being crucified. So he says about the people crucifying him, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." So Benvolio echoing those words of Jesus there, establishing him as a very moral character, as this peacemaker. And he is foiled by Tybalt. So a foil is two characters that are the complete opposite of each other, and that's used to emphasise their characteristics. So Tybalt is a foil to Benvolio. He is rash, aggressive, violent, wants nothing more than to fight the Montagues. So when Benvolio says the word peace, Tybalt says, "I hate the word, as I hate hell, all Montagues, and thee." So the fact that he conflates hell and the Montagues together, obviously, a good Christian should hate hell. That's kind of the most extreme evil place. And yet Tybalt conflates that and brings it together with the idea of the Montagues. So it's showing, again, how petty this feud is, that he sees the Montagues as the epitome of all evil, just because they're Montagues, even though Benvolio, as we've seen, is this moral character. So the citizens try to break up the fight between the Montagues and the Capulets. They're unable to, and then we see Lord Capulet and Lord Montague arrive, and they try and join in the fight, but they are stopped by their wives, who basically say that they're too old to fight. And then the prince finally arrives, and he is able to stop the fight. He's the ruler of Verona, so he has the official power. And he talks about the bloodshed that the feud has caused, and he refers to the Montagues and the Capulets' cankered hate. So a canker is a disease that you see on a plant, or you could talk about a wound as a canker. So it's the idea of kind of a disease, something rotten that spreads destruction. And this is what their hatred is doing, that it's kind of rotting them from the inside out, that it's spreading all of this destruction, and eventually it's going to lead to death. And he also says that their quarrel was bred of an airy word. So the idea of airy, something insubstantial, something that shouldn't matter at all, something that's basically nothing, and yet it leads to all this bloodshed. So again, it's showing how inconsequential, how petty their feud is. And the prince then says that if there is another brawl, another fight on the streets of Verona, that he will execute Capulet and Montague. He talks about that death will be the punishment then, because he is essentially so sick of all of this bloodshed on the streets of the city. So then the prince leaves, and the Montagues then talk about Romeo, who's not here at this point. And they talk about how he's seemed very unhappy, that he's shunned their society, and Benvolio, who's his friend, says that Romeo ran away from him earlier in the day. But so Benvolio promises Lord and Lady Montague that he will find out what's wrong with Romeo, and when he finds Romeo, or sees Romeo, it turns out that what's wrong with Romeo is that he is in love with a lady called Rosaline, and she is not in love with him, so he's suffering from unrequited love. And he expresses this through a range of oxymorons. So an oxymoron is where you have two opposites together in a word or a phrase. And Romeo uses lots of them. One example here is brawling love. So it's used to express the inner conflict that Romeo feels, because he loves Rosaline, but in a way kind of has hatred as well, because she doesn't love him. Brawling love as well, brawling implying a sense of being out of control. something violent, aggressive, painful, and that juxtaposing with the idea of love, which obviously is supposed to be a very positive emotion, but that this unrequited love is the opposite of that for him. It's a painful, out of control experience. And then so we've got another structural choice here, because the first time we meet Romeo, even though we're expecting from the title of the play for him to fall in love with Juliet, he's actually in love with Rosaline at this point, which arguably has two different effects. So you could say that it shows that his love for Juliet is true love, because when he meets her he forgets about Rosaline, but you could also say that it just shows that maybe Romeo is this very impulsive character, and that he maybe falls in love a little too quickly, and arguably you could say that suggests that his love for Juliet is not true love, but I think probably it's more just to show that he's impulsive, and then show the contrast between this love, this unrequited love, and then the requited love that Juliet gives to him later on, and the idea that it's requited love that is true love.